I bought a painting. The person inside is still alive. True cursed object horror story. Ethan didn't believe in curses. He believed in bargains. So when he found a dusty portrait selling for nearly nothing at a flea market, he thought he'd uncovered hidden value. But at home, the painting changed. People began disappearing. Neighbors, friends, strangers, and every time Ethan swore he saw another face inside the portrait. Those trapped eyes stared, begging for help. But saving them meant risking the same fate, becoming a prisoner behind the canvas forever. Ethan always loved collecting old things, relics forgotten by history, objects once loved but abandoned. It wasn't sentimentality. It was the thrill of owning something unique, something with a story. But nothing he'd found before compared to the painting he discovered that cold Saturday morning. It was buried beneath a stack of broken frames at a flea market on the outskirts of town. The stall belonged to an elderly woman whose hollow eyes scanned every passerby with weariness. While others ignored the cluttered booth, Ethan's gaze locked onto a dark canvas jutting from the pile. He tugged it free, brushing off years of neglect. The painting was a portrait, a man seated in an old wooden chair, his expression frozen somewhere between terror and pleading. His eyes were too detailed, too real, like the artist painted a living soul into them. The background behind him was nearly pitch black, except for faint smudges resembling shapes, silhouettes, watching from the dark. The painting felt unsettling wrong, but also mesmerizing. How much? Ethan asked without thinking. The old woman flinched at his voice, then stepped closer, lowering her voice. You don't want that. Her tone wasn't persuasive, it was fearful. But Ethan had already decided. I'll take it. She whispered one final warning as he handed her the cash. Don't hang it where you sleep. Ethan forced a chuckle. But will he stare at me all night? She didn't smile. Yes. Despite her seriousness, he shrugged off the chill running down his spine. He carefully packed the portrait into his car and drove home, excitement overpowering discomfort. His apartment was small, quiet, and sparsely decorated, perfect for displaying his thrifty treasures. He hung the painting above the fireplace, stepping back to admire his find. That's when he saw it. The painted man's eyes seemed slightly shifted. Looking right at him, Ethan blinked, shaking off the illusion. Just tired, he muttered. The rest of the day passed normally. But at night, hours after he'd fallen asleep, he woke abruptly, heart pounding, drenched in sweat. Something was different. The room felt colder, the shadows deeper, and from the living room came a soft noise, like a stroke of a paintbrush sliding across canvas. He held his breath, listening. Silence. Curiosity warred with fear. Slowly, he stepped into the hallway and flipped the light. The portrait was different. The background, once nearly black, now showed the suggestion of a second figure, blurry but visible. A faint silhouette standing behind the man in the chair. Ethan stared, numb, trying to rationalize. Maybe he had misremembered. Maybe the lighting changed. But another detail froze him. The man's mouth was open now, just slightly, as if starting to speak. He backed away, shutting the hallway light off. His pulse thundered in his ears as he returned to bed. Morning brought a sliver of comfort. Sunlight made everything less threatening. He checked the painting again. The subtle changes remained, undeniable now. But instead of panic, he convinced himself it must be an artistic trick. Paint that responded to lighting. He posted pictures online, asking if anyone knew the artist. Perhaps it was worth more than he thought. No answers came. That night, Ethan invited his neighbor and friend, Mark, to see the painting. Mark approached the canvas and immediately stepped back. Dude, that guy's blinking. Ethan laughed nervously. Very funny. No, seriously, it blinked. Ethan stared, eyes burning, waiting. Seconds passed. Nothing happened. Maybe you need sleep, Ethan joked, dismissing the idea. But later that night, after Mark left, something far worse occurred. A scream ricocheted through the building. Ethan shot out of bed, stumbling to the hallway window. A crowd gathered outside, police lights painting the street red and blue. Paramedics pushed a stretcher with a sheet covering a body. Ethan's knees nearly gave out. He turned slowly toward the painting, dread pulling his gaze. There were now two figures clearly visible behind the man in the chair, and the newest one had Mark's unmistakable face twisted in terror, mouth open in a frozen scream. Ethan staggered back, blood draining from his face. His heart thrashed as cold realization crushed him. The painting changed when people disappeared. He rushed to grab the painting, intending to throw it out. But before he could tear it from the wall, the eyes in the portrait snapped to him again, this time undeniably alive. He screamed and fell backward. Then a new sound, knocking. Slow, patient, coming from inside the wall behind the painting. 3 knocks. 3 more. Ethan scrambled to his room, slamming the door and pushing furniture against it. He stayed awake until dawn, shaking uncontrollably. Daylight brought no relief, only the grim need to understand. He researched cursed objects, portraits specifically, finding folklore about stolen souls trapped within artwork. Stories of paintings that fed on the living, adding victims to their eternal gallery. But myths couldn't help him. He didn't need legends. He needed to stop the next disappearance. He covered the painting with a sheet, a poor attempt at control. But that night, the fabric slowly rose and fell, as if something beneath it breathed. Ethan whispered to the empty room, "What do you want from me?" As if answering, the sheet fell to the floor, exposing the painting and a third new face. Someone Ethan didn't recognize, eyes hollow, skin peeling. The man in the chair looked more alive than ever, like he was waiting to stand. Ethan realized the truth. It wasn't just capturing people. It was getting stronger. And if he didn't stop it soon, he would be next. Ethan couldn't outrun fear anymore. Not after Mark. Not after watching the painting breathe like a trapped animal beneath the sheet. Something inside that canvas was alive and hungry. He refused to sleep that night, pacing the living room with knife in hand, eyes locked on the covered portrait. Every creak of the floorboards, every shifting shadow made him jump. But nothing happened. Morning came. Sunlight spilled across the room, and Ethan felt foolish, superstitious, exhausted. Maybe stress distorted everything. Maybe Mark's death was just a coincidence. He tried work, tried eating, couldn't swallow past the knot of dread. His gaze kept drifting back to the canvas. Finally, he called the flea market, hoping the old vendor might explain something. But the number listed online led nowhere. No trace of her booth. No name. No records. Like she never existed. That's when the knocking returned. Soft at first, gentle taps against the wall. Ethan froze, grip tightening on the knife. The knocks grew louder, more urgent. The painting bulged outward as if someone was pushing from inside. The sheet slid off again. The man in the chair now leaned forward, his knees visible. His hands gripped the armrests so tightly the knuckles appeared white. Behind him stood several figures, all pressed close, faces stretched as though screaming behind invisible glass. The background smears had become a crowd. Ethan backed away until his spine hit the opposite wall. His throat tightened. "No, no more," he whispered. A new sound scraped the air, whispers, layered and overlapping. He couldn't understand the words, until one rose above the rest. "Help me." The voice sounded like Mark. Ethan's chest heaved with terror and guilt. He stepped closer, trembling violently. The painted Mark stared back, eyes full of pain and desperate recognition. "What do you want me to do?" Ethan whispered. The voice returned, this time not Mark's. "Trade." The figures shifted, separating to reveal a different face emerging inside the painting. One Ethan recognized instantly. His own. Not fully formed yet, blurry and unfinished like wet paint waiting to dry. But undeniably him. Ethan stumbled backward, choking on fear. They weren't asking him to free them. They wanted him to join them. His survival instinct surged. There had to be a way to destroy the painting. Fire, knife, anything. He lifted the blade and charged forward, but the portrait's surface pulsed like flesh. The knife stopped midair as invisible hands gripped his wrist. His muscles seized. The air thickened, pressing into his lungs like wet cement. Ethan dropped the blade, gasping. The painted man slowly turned his gaze and blinked. The canvas rippled, warping outward like melting plastic. Half-formed arms pushed from inside, clawing at the frame. The smell of oil and rotting earth overwhelmed the room. Ethan stumbled backward, but something wrapped around his ankle, a cold, painted hand emerging from the bottom edge. He screamed, kicking wildly until it slipped away. He ran to his bedroom and slammed the door. Frantic, he pushed furniture against it, breathing in harsh bursts. Silence returned slowly, but his heart wouldn't quit pounding. He called the police. How could he explain? He barely understood himself. So he lied, said someone broke into his apartment, that he felt unsafe. An officer arrived 20 minutes later, Officer Wren. Calm, skeptical, professional. Ethan led him to the living room, pointing shakily at the portrait. Just watch it. Wren raised an eyebrow. It's a painting. No, it's alive. Ethan shouted. He sounded insane, and knew it. His voice cracked under the strain. Wren stepped closer, examining the portrait. It's detailed, sure, but I don't. He stopped mid-sentence. Did you hear that? He whispered. A faint knocking from inside the wall behind the canvas answered him. Wren's posture shifted, a mix of confusion and unease. He put a hand near his holster. Then the painting's surface convulsed, violently, like something slamming against it from within. Wren swore and stepped back, drawing his gun. Before he could fire, a face pressed into the canvas, screaming without sound. Its mouth stretched unnaturally wide. Wren fired 3 rounds. The bullets vanished into the portrait like water. The screaming face sank back into darkness. Ethan grabbed the officer's arm. We have to destroy it. Wren nodded, adrenaline fueling resolve. Together they pulled the portrait from the wall, smashing it onto the floor. The frame splintered, but the canvas didn't tear. Instead, crimson veins pulsed beneath the surface. Burn it, Ethan said. Wren flicked his lighter. Flames touched the corner of the canvas, and the fire reversed, sucking into the painting instead of spreading. The portrait drank the flame like oxygen. A hand burst outward, seized Wren's throat, and yanked him into the painting. Ethan lunged too late. The canvas showed Wren now, his face twisted in terror, both palms pressed against the inside. Ethan collapsed, sobbing as whispers surrounded him. One more. One more. One more. He stood painfully, gripping the broken frame like a shield. His gaze drifted to the door, escape. But whispers curled into a single command. Complete the trade. Ethan understood. His face would fully form only when another victim replaced him. Someone had to suffer so he could live. The painting offered a cruel bargain. He could survive by delivering someone else. His breathing slowed. Madness and fear warred behind his eyes. He stared at the portrait, at Wren desperately pounding, and clenched his jaw. No, he croaked. I won't. The man in the chair smiled, first time ever, and slowly stood. The canvas stretched outward as though the painted world expanded. Shadows formed a doorway, open, inviting. Ethan backed away. His mind broke into fragments of panic. The doorway widened. A voice, ancient, deep, emotionless, spoke inside his skull. Then you will take his place. Hands shot out, dozens, grasping at him. Ethan screamed as they dragged his body toward the painting. The living room folded inward like collapsing space. He clawed at the floor, nails ripping, skin tearing, but his strength failed. The last thing he saw was his own painted eyes looking back at him, fully formed and full of despair. Then darkness, silence, and the portrait returned to stillness. Hours later, neighbors reported the officer missing. They found the apartment door open, furniture overturned, blood smears on the floor, and the painting, perfectly intact, hanging neatly above the fireplace once more. Inside the portrait, the man in the chair sat again. Ren stood behind him. Ethan stood beside them both, forever screaming. The crowd of trapped souls grew. A new space in the background waited. For the next owner. For the next trade. Some bargains cost more than money. Some treasures demand souls instead of value. Ethan didn't know that when he brought the painting home, and now his existence hangs trapped behind a canvas, begging for someone else to take his place. If you ever find a portrait where the eyes look too alive, walk away. Because if you don't, the next face added to the painting might not be a stranger. It might be staring back at you.